Well, hello again, and welcome to God's Answers for Anxiety and Depression. I'm Pastor Ray Barnett, and glad you could be with me here today on another broadcast. I want to wish you a good morning, or a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on what time you're watching the broadcast. Today, I have selected this spot. It's a little hamlet, very, very close to where I live. As a matter of fact, for those of you who have been watching steadily and recall that we have been down at the Mohawk River, and you've seen Putman's grocery store. I've shown you part of the Erie Canal, or what eventually became the Erie Barge Canal. And here in Fort Hunter, there's a long history here. It's amazing that so much history can be surrounding you all the time, and of course local people would be more acquainted with it than I would be, being a transplant from New York City, or Yonkers in particular. But you know, all the years I lived in New York City, I never visited the Statue of Liberty because it was always there. And I would often find people talking about sites they've seen. Even Van Cortlandt Park is a great history behind that too. And I lived on our last house was on Van Cortlandt Park. But what I wanted to say is that there's so much history here in the East Coast, and I'm here at Fort Hunter. This location, as far as American history is concerned, dates back to the 1600s, where it was literally a fort, as there were many of them. If you look on a map of New York State and just put in fort, you'll see how many were in the area, Lake George and so on, and here as well. Queen Anne of England in the late 1600s had a fort built here, and then she brought a chapel over, or had a chapel built to protect the Mohawk tribe, which at that point in time they were aligned with the British, having skirmishes and eventually of course a war with the French. And so Fort Hunter was British occupied fort, British built fort. Queen Anne then built a chapel. A lot of interesting history here, it really is. You can't see it because I picked this spot for a reason. But in 2011, when Hurricane Irene came through, it washed out the parking lot. The visitor center is right here to my right. And you can go in and see what remains of the chapel. It's now a type of a house. But the waters from Hurricane Irene in 2011 uncovered more of the stones from this original canal, which I'll talk about in just a second, and also some of the foundations from the original Fort Hunter. The world is I want to say evolving, but I don't like that word. The world is, God is releasing to us a lot of knowledge that has been hitherto hidden in history all around the world. A lot of interesting things going on. In any case, you have a lot of history here at Fort Hunter, then including what I've already gone over with you before, is the building of the Erie Canal, and then what became the Erie Barge Canal. Behind me here is the Schoharie River, or in some places it's simply called Schoharie Creek. And if you look over, this is my left shoulder. The camera makes it look like it's my right shoulder, but it's my left shoulder. You'll see one of the ruins of the original canal aqueduct, and on top of it the tow path where mules would take cargo in the early part of the 1800s. Now I've already shown you some of these huge limestones down at Yankee Hill, where we're certain to be again, believe me. But here, and where I'm perched right now, is I'm about 40 feet above the water. So should something unforeseen happen to me, it's been nice doing these broadcasts. I'll go 40 feet down. I've already taken one big fall this year. I don't want another one. So I situated myself here under this nice tree where there's some shade for me and a view for you over my left shoulder. Okay, so you can see the ruins. Part of it was destroyed in the early 1900s by the Army Corps of Engineers. Ice was jamming up in here. Part of it just disintegrated. And again, just a lot of history. But the reason that I chose this spot to come was to use these ruins. Right? They're not ancient ruins, but they remind me at least of some of the Roman aqueducts, which my wife and I were in Rome many years ago, or in Italy. We were in Rome, but we also went to traveled to some other places in Italy. And it's interesting to see, you know, like the Pantheon, you know, it's 2,000 years. It was built by Titus, who was at the time General Titus. He's the same one that invaded Jerusalem and offered the swine on the Holy of Holies. He eventually became the emperor. So you have the Arch of Titus and all these things. And this here reminds me of that Roman type of architecture. And since we're talking about not all that long ago in our American history that this canal was no longer of use, and you have this ruin, which again is not thousands of years old, but it's old enough for our purposes. I wanted to use it as a prop. I wanted to use it as an illustration of what anxiety and depression can do to you. So, I don't know how well you can see it, but what you should be able to see is a structure that's going almost across the Schoharie and then just falls off. Matter of fact, I just took a walk further down at the same spot where this towpath and the rest of the whole aqueduct structure would have placed on the other side of the river. And I thought this was a better spot to shoot in the hopes that you could see this clearly enough for the purposes of illustration. So here you have this towpath and the aqueduct going. At one time it stretched all the way across. Now, to segue into anxiety and depression, this is what happens with our lives. So here you have a complete life. That's assuming that your problem didn't begin when you were very, very young. Even schizophrenia begins usually when it's been called precox dementia. It means an early onset of dementia, which I'm not sure how vogue that word is any longer, but it was in the 1940s. Unless your situation began many, many years ago, when for some it has. This is what happens to your life. These anxieties, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, depression, and so on, come in and just your life just collapses. And this, of course, makes for an incomplete life. I think to myself, as a pastor of going on 44 years tenure, of how many lives I've seen ruined. And let me just broaden the subject, the topic, from anxiety and depression to just sin. Yesterday when we were up at the Sacandaga Lake and I was reflecting and going over the good times we had there. That's Northampton, where we were, little hamlet of Northampton. That's got quite a history as well. But I was thinking about how all the people that I've seen and met and counseled and prayed for, whose lives not only once were ruined, but they are ruined because they never made the attempt to correct the problem. See, anxiety and depression are things that can be corrected. Let's look at schizophrenia. Once again, one of the worst case scenarios for a mental health problem. And it has been termed the cancer of mental illness. But as I've told you in my story, and in one woman that I've worked with, and then there's another, who were diagnosed with schizophrenia that had it for decades, were able to eventually beat it from the teachings that I gave. One woman in particular, I'm thinking of, as you know, from broadcasts back when I mentioned it. 33 years, 34 years she had schizophrenia, and then after these teachings, the same type I'm giving to you, so simple, they're not as profound, maybe not as profound as you hoped that they would be. Can I make them complex? Sure. Can I make the talks complicated that makes me sound smart? Absolutely. But that's all you'd get out of it. You would say to yourself, boy, he's smart. But you know, there's a saying that's attributed to Albert Einstein, that if you can't state it simply, if you can't state the subject simply, it's because it's not well understood. Abraham Lincoln, by the way, had the same quality, and all people who are really great teachers have the ability, for instance, an epigram. You know, time, where Benjamin Franklin said, the time is the stuff that life is made of. A very epigrammatic, terse statement with a lot of potential. If a teacher can't state things simply, it's because they don't understand it well enough to help people. So what I was trying to say is this. You're getting very simple teachings. Quite a few of you now are writing into me and saying how much they're helping you. Yeah, I can make them complex. I can make them complicated. And all that I'll get is some more subscribers that want to listen to somebody who sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I would prefer to listen to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and can state it simply. Even in writing, if you're going to write a book, novel, or anything, they always tell you to write tight. That means condense it, use less words. All right. Our life is a lot like this, the remains of this aqueduct that was once part of the original Erie Canal, built before the American Civil War, about 1844. And our life becomes that way when anxiety starts to enter, regardless of the age. When then depression starts to enter, and all of a sudden we're not living a whole life anymore. Here, as I pointed out to you, I was just at the other end of where the towpath would have come across and landed, or it did at one point in time. And I was standing on the right on top of the limestones that once held it in place. After it was destroyed from ice jams, and then two other arches collapsed, we have about, I don't know, maybe half of the towpath of the canal aqueduct left. And that's exactly what anxiety, and you would agree with me, I'm sure. If I could see you, which I can't, I know right now somebody's nodding their head and saying yes. It has taken life away from me. It's taken away from my life. And I don't think that I'm a champion of the obvious when I state that, because sometimes we're so anxious we're not even thinking of how much life has been taken away from us, because we're so focused on the problem. We're not aware that maybe years have gone by now. We're not really living, as I've mentioned to you before. We're surviving. Okay, when a situation is chronic, anxiety is chronic, when depression is chronic, well, yeah, you have to survive. But as I told you in times past, the idea is to conquer this. It is to become free again, or if you've had it all of your life, then it's simply to become free. That you want to be free, maybe for the first time in your life. So the illustration of this little ruin behind me is to say that anxiety, depression, mental health troubles and disorders has eaten up part of your life. Part of your life has collapsed. Part of your life has disappeared and vanished. However, there is no plans, as far as I know, to restore the parts of this aqueduct to what it was. I assume it's going to be left as it is. But thankfully, your life can be restored. Anxiety does not have to be eating away at you and causing your life to just plunge into the river below. You don't need the ice jams any longer to be the cause of why you have anxiety, which I honestly makes a really great illustration. The reason that part of the canal was originally taken down, I told you, by the Army Corps of Engineers, was because it was getting jammed with ice. See, something's precipitating your anxiety and is causing the bridge to have to be, like in cases like mine and others, treatments that were given to me at the time were the only thing that they could do. So it was precipitated by something else, though, causing it. They didn't know what it was. Medications didn't work for me. And so you wind up with these, let me just be honest with you, and again, it's my own opinion of my own life, which I'm the only expert on the whole planet of my own life. So I state it as just one person's opinion. Some of the treatments that I was given were pretty barbaric. Not fun. But they did provide an impetus to get healed. So you have these ice jams, and they're coming, and now someone's saying, we got to take away part of your life. It's like losing your leg. When you don't have two, you're not complete. Yes, you can still live, but not fully. And you don't want to live that way. So here again, yesterday I was talking to you using the Socratic epigram, axiom: beware the barrenness of a busy life. In order to begin to conquer anxiety and or depression, we've got to slow down, and especially the mind. We'll slow it down. Old sayings, so much profound truth in some of these old sayings. Here's one for you: the more haste, the less speed. In boxing, I use boxing as an illustration. That was something I was very proficient at, very good at. You don't gain powers comes from speed, and speed comes from being relaxed. If you're trying to rush into it, you're tense. If you're tense, your speed slows down, and therefore your power slows down. You have less power. Well, the same thing with life. If you don't slow down, which when you have anxiety, it's feeding the haste, mostly here, rushing thoughts, and so forth. Many of you can relate to what I'm speaking about. And then it's a frenetic type of activity that you get into, and what happens is your life starts to look like this ruin of the aqueduct. It starts to fall apart. Now the tendency is to create more haste, especially with anxiety, and now you're concerned, and it's a vicious cycle, just going like this. Except the cycle is getting bigger and bigger, and your problem is getting worse and worse. Excuse me. I want to be able to help you to overcome these things on this broadcast. We live in an age that I spoke to you once before. In the 20th century, W.H. Auden, the poet, wrote a little play, and the play was called The Age of Anxiety. With all of the innovations and some of the things that have definitely helped us, technology in particular, have also brought us more anxiety, more things to worry about, more things to think about. Odd as it may seem, being on a social media platform, I would advise you to make sure you're using the social media platform and that the platform is not using you. This is an example of the type of tension that we have between the technology of the age, which is now produced beginning in the 20th century, if not before, an age of anxiety, of nervousness. You know, many people cannot do, that's what they would not do. They cannot do what I'm doing. Just sit. Remember we talked about that? Sitting, motionless sitting, no moving, no fingers, nothing, has a tremendous beneficial effect on your nervous system. Tremendous. So simple. See again, simple. I hasten, or I should say, I don't hasten to say what I'm about to say. But there are so many experts, medical experts, people who have studied psychology, who jumped to some type of treatment that in the end may not be in your best interest. Well, that's between you and your physician. And that's between you and your counselor if you have one. I'm just simply saying that if you just start with one thing, such as slow down, take time, beware of the barrenness of a busy life, beware that your life doesn't become like this ruin behind me because of haste, because of rushing, and take the time to just slow down. Now, as simple as that sounds, right? For somebody who's watching who's got a PhD in psychology, remember, my PhD is in biblical studies. It just so happens that my dissertation, my first dissertation, I have a few of them, my first dissertation was on how the Bible relates to mental health. And I'm telling you that the principles of God, which are simple, not always easy, but they're simple, will go a long, long way in healing you from all of your fears, delivering you from all of your fears, from all of your anxieties, depression as well. God, the Creator, who created this beautiful nature that we see. And I don't know if you could hear that alarm going off. I'm assuming that you can. It's necessary because there must be a fire or something going on somewhere. But I'll just use it as an illustration. Here we have the birds and the river, though you probably can't hear it going on before us. Then you have the invention of men, in this case a necessary one, that mars it. God's providing us today with a lot of useful illustrations. Anyway, let me just finish by saying that I picked this spot so that you can see what your life looks like in the picture. Of anxiety and depression and frustration and anger and hatred and envy and all of these things, which may very well be the ice jam that is causing your life to collapse and leaving you with a ruined life. Those are the things you want to get rid of through confessing it to God and asking for grace and asking for help. Because once that happens, you can rebuild the towpath and connect again in the things that you love to do, the people that you love, and also in life in general. There's hope. Even for the most hopeless case on the planet, wherever that person is, in Christ, there is always hope. Father, I just pray today once again that the folks that are watching would be able to gain the peace of Christ, that they would be able to gain the serenity, the healing, the deliverance that you offer. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives it, give I unto you. I ask that everyone today, Father, would have that peace right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm glad that you can be with me here today, and I hope that these broadcasts are helping. Again, a number of you are writing to me or commenting that they are, and I'm glad. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like these teachings, want to hear more of them, and hit the notification button. And tomorrow I'll try to do another stories of my life and relate it to the same issues, where I tell a personal story and relate it to how you can be delivered from anxiety and depression. So until I see you tomorrow, God bless, and thanks for being with me here today on God's Answers for Anxiety and Depression. See you tomorrow.